So, welcome to the tier list. I have separated the cards into multiple tiers. We're going to be going through every Series 4 and Series 5 card from a perspective of what cards you should purchase in order to be a competitive player. Now, the 5 tiers are already on the screen for you. I'm going to go through them all for you just so we can get that out of the way. Tier number 1, High Evolutionary, critical part of incredibly important decks and kind of irreplaceable in every single one of them. Tier number 2 is going to be cards that are critical to good decks, but maybe not the only thing you need to play a good deck. So these are going to be cards like Hitmonkey, perhaps, where it's like, okay, you need that and Kitty Pryde. That's going to go in there. And also cards that are just generally very good across the board. They're going to go in the second tier. Tier number 3 is going to have the same sort of thing, but for worse cards in worse decks. As always, it's important to remember that a card's power is entirely dependent upon context. So this is not to say that these cards are always going to be in tier 3 or tier 4 or whatever. Just, you know, they are there now. And if things change, then so will my rankings. Tier number 4 is mid. That is not a compliment. You do not want to be in tier number 4. The thing about being mid is that there's always a better thing to do than the thing that you're doing. Kind of sucks, right? So finally, we have tier do not buy, and that seems pretty self-explanatory. Do not buy. Let's jump into actually talking about these cards. Let's go. All right, so we're going to start with Darkhawk. And Darkhawk is a little bit worse, I would say, than he used to be. He's actually so hard to rank here because you want to put him here, but you also want to put him here. And I don't know if you would describe Darkhawk midrange as a great deck right now because of how the issues that it has with the bounce decks, unless you're including Invisible Woman and Killmonger, I'm a little bit iffy on this. I would think that Darkhawk ends up in the second or third tier. I don't know exactly where. We're probably going to revisit these tiers at the end of the video. So for now, I'm going to put him in the third tier and then just move on. And if it comes back to me and I'm like, okay, Darkhawk should probably get moved up, that is entirely plausible. So Galactus is up next. Galactus, I would say, I think the Galactus deck can reasonably be described as good, but it might just actually be bad. It might just actually be bad. It might not actually be a good thing there. And so I think that with Galactus up here, I think I want to put him in critical part of good decks / mid everywhere. But if I'm doing that, I do think it means that Darkhawk gets bumped up. Because, like, Darkhawk and Galactus cannot be in the same tier. I'm sorry, they just can't. That's not a thing that they can do. It's not fair. They're not going to be in the same. They're not going to be in the same tier. We're not going to have it like that. So I think with Galactus, we are going to have to just keep him where he is, and I think that does push the Darkhawk up. We'll see if anything pushes it down, though. Ghost Spider, it's going in the Galactus tier, where it's like, you know, I would not necessarily play a move deck if I had other options, but I don't hate playing a move deck. I think it's pretty much fine. I'm happy to describe move as a good deck, and since I'm happy to describe move as good deck, Ghost Spider, critical part of it, but there are definitely going to be higher priority things you can buy. High Evolutionary, well, we created his own tier for High Evolutionary, and he's the only card that goes in High Evolutionary tier, so yeah, that's where he goes. High Evolutionary is as good as it gets. There is nothing better than this card. It is the best possible purchase you can make, and the reason it's the best possible purchase you can make is you can play it with basically only Series 3 cards and have one of or two of the best decks in the game, just by getting High Evolutionary for your 6,000 tokens or opening him in the future in one of the new boxes. So there is no card that competes with this in terms of value for purchase. It just doesn't exist. And so I think that it is very clearly the only card that belongs to the highest tier right now. There is nothing else that is as much of a solo carry for your account value than that High Evolutionary is. So Hitmonkey, very clearly in critical to great decks and good everywhere. Hitmonkey is a card you cannot play the bounce deck without. You cannot play the Sarah deck without. You need Hitmonkey to play those decks. Those decks are very good. Bounce, of course, a little bit better in my opinion. Bounce is probably the best deck in the game by my estimation at the point of the time that I'm making this. You need Hitmonkey to play it. Critical to a great deck. That's where he goes. Howard the Duck. Do not buy. Do not buy Howard the Duck. I'd like to take a couple minutes to talk about Howard the Duck, but instead I'm going to take like 30 seconds. So basically, the issue with Howard the Duck is that he's not actually giving you anything that really changes how you play. There's maybe one scenario where knowing the top card of your deck matters beyond, you know, just knowing it, right? And that is the scenario where you're playing Iron Lad and Jubilee on the same turn after a Zabu. If you're ever in that scenario, I think Howard the Duck is actually like a reasonable card to play. I don't think that you can like necessarily say he's complete trash. I just think he's very clearly not a card you should be spending any resources on if you can avoid it. Iron Lad is going to go in here, I think, because I think Iron Lad's another case like Darkhawk, except I'm a little bit more confident in Iron Lad because he goes in multiple lists, right? So Darkhawk is played in Darkhawk decks, Iron Lad is played in Darkhawk decks, and he's played in some random Thanos decks, and he's played in some Patriot decks. And so Iron Lad, I think I'm more confident in having in this tier under the good everywhere criteria than I was with Darkhawk. I think Darkhawk is probably the bottom of this tier, and Iron Lad is just, it's played in more things, it's more generally useful. I'm not taking into account token cost right now because I don't know how that's going to change in the future, and because the new boxes are specifically built in such a way that token cost almost doesn't matter. So I think Iron Lad is a little bit more of an important card than Darkhawk because it is played in multiple decks. Like, I think you are not playing a Darkhawk deck if you don't have Iron Lad, and yeah, that kind of just says it all, right? Jeff is above Iron Lad here. Jeff is here under the good everywhere clause. He's just great whenever you are playing any kind of curve out deck. You put Jeff in it, and that's pretty much how it goes. Jeff is up there. He's in my bounce deck. He's in my Darkhawk deck. He's in basically everything that I play. Love the guy. Unless you're playing something with very heavy synergy, you are probably playing this card at some point. Kang, do not buy. Kang goes in do not buy. Kang has progressively dropped down and down and down my tier lists as I've gotten less enamored with big bad status. As they've released like more cards that are actually worth buying, as they've made it clear that, like, you know, other things are also not downgrading. Kang's only selling point was that he was a big bad and would always cost 6,000. He's not a very good card. You don't need him to do anything. He really honestly sucks. Don't buy him. Kitty Pryde is above Hitmonkey. Absolutely critical. I mean, Kitty Pryde and Hitmonkey are a duo. They go together. Hitmonkey's in almost every Kitty Pryde deck. Kitty Pryde's in almost every Hitmonkey deck. They do what they do. And that is... There's almost nothing to say about this, because if you are a longtime viewer of my channel, you know I've been a big Bounce fan. You know I've made like 3 videos on Bounce in the past month. You can absolutely just know what I'm thinking here already. If you are new to my channel, please check out those videos if you want to know why Kitty Pryde and Hitmonkey are so good. But basically, this is the core of the deck that puts the most points on the board in the entire game. Null is hard to rank, actually. I think I'm putting Null... I think I might put Null here and maybe above Galactus, because Galactus wants Null, but so do those Destroy decks. And I actually think the Destroy archetype is a little bit more viable than the other archetypes that Null goes in right now. That Destroy archetype is actually kind of something. I don't necessarily think it's like the best thing in the game, but it's like, it's kind of something. You're taking advantage of a severe lack of armor in Cosmo. Generally, I don't think it's very good. Like, you are pretty reliant on doing things like Shuri into Nimrod, and if you're not doing that, you're in like an awkward spot. Or if you're playing the Deadpool version of it, I think you're a little bit predictable. But just being a deck that plays Shang-Chi and Killmonger takes you a long way when you were able to do that, and of course the Shuri Nimrod version carries in that way. Master Mold is going in the mid tier. Master Mold is just by definition extremely, extremely mid. A minorly useful card. I have a decent amount of respect for the Ronin decks. I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to be doing. But I think you're probably always going to be wanting to play something else if you can. I think you're not competing on points with the kitty decks, and the fact that you're investing your turn 5 into something that is not stopping the kitty decks it just sort of makes the deck get power crept out of the meta. So Master Mold is in mid. He goes in a deck, but I don't like the deck. MODOK is going to go in critical part of good decks / mid everywhere. I think I would expect to see a lot of season pass cards in this sort of rank because, you know, we have critical part of good decks / mid everywhere. What that means is like, you know, like basic kind of decks, you know, like the destroy deck, the discard deck, the move deck. Cards like Ghost Spider, MODOK, Null are mostly core to that stuff. And so, yeah, they're critical parts of, like, okay decks. Like, you will get a better deck if you get this. It's just that deck probably won't be very good. Discard is one of the better ones, but it runs into the same problem that I talked about with the Ronin stuff, which is if you're spending your turn 5 on just points, the kitty deck is probably going to go bigger than you. I do like that Discard gets to play Storm and, like, shrink the kitty Hitmonkey combo, but I don't know if that's enough. Nebula. Oh, Nebula's really hard to rank. Nebula's really hard to rank. I think she goes in critical to great decks / good everywhere. Oh, Nebula is so hard to rank. So the thing with Nebula, she's critical to the lockdown deck. She's good in a lot of Electro lists. I think that's good enough for me to say she's in here. Yeah, I think so. Nebula is basically one of the best scaling 1-drops in the game. She has a problem with Kitty Pryde existing, which is why she tends to only see play in decks that just sort of auto-farm Kitty Pryde decks. So it's also possible that she goes in here under the good everywhere clause, where she's just generically pretty damn good, the same way Jeff is, but worse. Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Do not buy. While we're down here, we're going to put Kang at the front of Do Not Buy. Like, if you want to, go off. But, like, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Do Not Buy. This card is, like, cool, but it's not worth your tokens. It's not worth opening chests for in the future. I wouldn't advise doing that in any real way. It's so odd to me that they were like, we need to buff Negasonic Teenage Warhead. And what we're going to do to buff Negasonic Teenage Warhead is we're going to make it a 3/5. The card that blows up, we're going to give it a competitive stat line. I don't understand that. I don't know what they were going for there. I think if you wanted to explain it, they would explain it as like, okay, well, yeah, now she's better if you play her late in like Sarah Surfer. But it's like, aren't you trying to make this card kind of okay? Like, it doesn't do it. If you're doing the thing that the card wants you to do, that buff changed nothing. Nimrod. I'm going to put him in here because I have enjoyed the Destroy archetype a little bit, but I think there is a very coherent argument for dropping him to here. I'm putting him here just on the strength of, like, I think that archetype is real enough, and you should respect shit like, when someone goes Shuri into Nimrod, it's very scary. You get, like, Venomed and Deathlocked or whatever the fuck, and there's just, like, a bunch of 12 Nimrods running around. It's not bad. It's sincerely not bad. Now, I don't know if that archetype is real in any other context, which is to say, it dies to armor, it dies to Cosmo. It's absolutely fucking terrible if you see any of that shit. But it's worth keeping that in mind, I think. So I'll have Nimrod in there. I think that's reasonable. Silk. So I have Silk. I have not particularly enjoyed her. I don't think she's... I think one thing that I like, she's good enough, right? Like, one thing that she does really well is she beats Doctor Doom. But one thing that she does really badly is she's just really, really hard to play with. She reminds me a bit of a 2-cost Titania, which is to say the skill ceiling with her is very, very high. And you have to have a good understanding of probability in order to actually get the most kind of value out of this card. So I'm thinking I put her at the back end of critical part of good decks / mid everywhere. I think she goes at the back end of this, but I'm a little suspicious of her. It's like a lot of the stuff in this tier is just not stuff I would reasonably play most of the time. And she, I think, fits in that pretty reasonably. She's good in terms of getting power into lockdown locations. Beating a Doctor Doom is not nothing, but it doesn't happen as much as you think. Snowguard is going in Do Not Buy. Arguably the worst card in the game. If I opened this for free in Series 3, I'd be pretty annoyed. And you actually don't even get the chance to open it for free. Like, the card is just awful. I got nothing. All right. Spider-Ham, I think, is going in the back end of this. But there's a chance I'm overrating him. Because Spider-Ham, I kind of wonder if he's actually worth it. I do think it's good. I do think he's a really good card. The reason he's going in here is basically, I was playing a Darkhawk deck yesterday, and I was thinking, if I just swapped out Korg for Spider-Ham, is that actually, like, bad for me? Like, I don't like, and once you're thinking about swapping out Korg in a Darkhawk deck, I do think it says a little bit about the power of Spider-Ham that I'm even having that kind of thought, I think is worth pointing out. So I don't necessarily mind that kind of situation, right? Like, I don't think I'm overrating it too hard to put it in here. Spider-Man 2099, I think is pretty clearly a tier below Ghost Spider. I'm using Ghost Spider as my barometer here. I think if you had to pick a move card to get, you'd get Ghost Spider over 2099 every single time. Again, not counting like token values in this or anything like that, because for most people when they watch this, it's going to be about the boxes. Stature. Oh, Stature. This is so hard. Oh, God. Oh, God. Stature. I don't even think she's good in her own deck anymore. Oh, my. Oh, man. I think Stature had a brief moment in what would be tier 3 or tier 2, and now she's getting bumped back to tier 4. I think Stature is going in mid-tier, but above Master Mold, probably. Oh, man, that's so depressing. All right, Stegron. I will cop to, I think Stegron is mid. I think Stegron is somewhere around Spider-Man 2099 and arguably a little bit better because he's more generally applicable. So I kind of think that that's what this looks like here. Like Stegron going in here, we kind of look like this, I think, because yeah, this makes sense to me. I think this is how I would want to categorize things right now. Now, Thanos is actually, this is a card that if you asked me like 2 weeks ago, I would say you shouldn't even buy him outside of being a big bad. Oh, man. Honestly, I also, while I'm here, I want to rework this a little bit. I think Galactus goes at the back end of this, and most of why he's here is just because he is a big bad. I actually had a lot of success with a small Thanos list that Astrolad made. So I do think he's probably better than Galactus. I do think he goes into mid. He's like mid everywhere. I think he's like the front of mid everywhere, right? Where it's like you get him and you get like 5 decks and they're all like that. He's like shitty high Evo, right? You get high Evo and you get like 3 decks that are all incredible, right? You get Thanos, you get like 20 decks, but they're all like, okay. Like that's the thing that's going on with Thanos, where it's like I think he's a little underrated right now, honestly, but I don't think that pushes him up into the critical to great decks tier. All right, next up is the Living Tribunal. The Living Tribunal. I mean, what are we talking about here, right? This guy's fucking terrible. This guy is awful. This is just like I don't know what you would have to do to get me to buy this card. Don't buy this guy. He's not good. He's not good. I am gonna move Zabu over to the bottom of Critical to Great decks. Actually, okay, so I think it would be like Darkhawk goes over here, Zabu goes like here, because Darkhawk and Zabu are a pair. And I think this is why I'm like so down on Darkhawk generally, because you look at all the other stuff you have to buy to play Darkhawk, right? You need Jeff, Iron Lad, Zabu, Darkhawk. Like, there's like so much shit you need, right? So I think that's where I'm at right now. Now, let me zoom in on the tier list a little bit, and we'll talk about how to use this to actually target cards. So here is the full tier list, and I think the thing that I really want to get across here is what I'm doing here is I'm talking about how you can make the best financial decisions you can make. So let's go over what decks you're actually building towards when you make these decisions, because that's really what I'm seeing when I look at this is groups of decks. So we have High Evolutionary at the top. You use this to build High Evolutionary Lockdown, High Evolutionary Lockjaw, or High Evolutionary Midrange. All three of these decks, very good, some of the best in the game, fundamentally incredibly strong things to be doing. I actually think I'm kind of interested in re-looking at High Evolutionary Midrange with Invisible Woman, Shang-Chi, Killmonger. It's an idea that came to me after I was thinking about, like, okay, the Darkhawk stuff with Invisible Woman, Shang-Chi, Killmonger, but the whole reason we moved away from the Darkhawk stuff was because the mid-range stuff in High Evo was actually just better. So, like, what if we just did that? What if we just put all that stuff in the Evo shell? Like, I haven't tried it yet, but that is a direction I'd be interested in exploring in the future. Now, next up, you see these two at the top of Critical to Great decks / Good Everywhere. Those are the core cards of the Bounce deck, Kitty Pryde and Hitmonkey. The Bounce deck is one of the best decks in the game, arguably the best. And they are at the top of this list because of it. Jeff can be run in so many decks. You run Jeff in basically, like, you run Jeff in almost any deck that isn't pure synergy. Excellent against Lockdown. I even run it in my Bounce deck. Iron Lad is run in Iron Patriot decks as well as in Darkhawk decks, and because he is run in both of those, he ends up a little bit higher than Darkhawk and Zabu, because Darkhawk and Zabu kind of only run in their own archetype. Nebula is run in Electro decks and Lockdown decks with High Evolutionary, because those are the decks that can stop Kitty Pryde from ruining her life by constantly playing there, that have good matchups into Kitty Pryde naturally, and are just interested in a very, very strong one-cost card, and will restrict your opponent's ability to play on the Nebula lane. Zabu and Darkhawk, another little pair here. I have been enjoying Darkhawk midrange recently. Honestly, if I hadn't been, they'd be a tier below. But Darkhawk is still a powerful thing to be doing. The disruption is still valuable. It's still a balanced deck with a lot of reasonable matchups into a lot of decks. It's just, you know, instead of being a deck that was, you know, 57% against everything, it's like 54 maybe. You know, it's maybe lower than that. Like, it's got some bad matchups now. It's no longer just I'm playing the best cards and I'm winning every game by, like, you know, 4 points, but I'm still winning. Now you're not winning those games. So it's definitely a little bit worse than it used to be. Spider-Ham is seeing play in Bounce, of course. Absolutely good card in Bounce, but, like, it's not like you need it to run Bounce. Like, you can do other things in Bounce. Like, you could play, I don't know. It's very important in Bounce. I think if I didn't have Spider-Ham, I would probably be playing Electra for the edge in the Bounce mirror, because there's no real good replacement for Spider-Ham. So if I'm not going to be playing Spider-Ham, I need to replace it with something that gives me an edge somewhere else, is kind of how I would think about that. But it's a great card. You play it in that. You play it in, I've seen it in some Electro decks. I've seen it in some just decks. Like, it goes in, like, Lockjaw decks sometimes. Like, some people just play this card. I don't know how overplayed it is. A lot of the times when I play it, I don't actually... It's hard to feel the impact of it in an accurate sense, which is to say, it feels better to Spider-Ham something than it probably is a lot of the time. And so I'm a little bit iffy on giving it, like, the highest rating that I can, but right now it is seeing a lot of play. You need to be prepared for it, and I think I'm pretty close to correct about this. Now, next up is the critical part of good decks slash mid everywhere. And so where you have the first two tiers being made up of just like, these are the cards you need to play all the good meta decks, right? This tier is, these are the cards you need to play like decks that are probably a little bit worse than the meta decks, right? So Thanos is his own archetype. He's 20 different archetypes. Null goes in Galactus decks if you can, goes in Destroy decks. Ghost Spider for move decks, MODOK for discard decks, Nimrod for boom boom decks, Silk for if you really feel the need to add some more things into your deck to combat lockdown, and Galactus because, I mean, that deck is kind of real, I think. Like, I think that deck is kind of plausibly real. There are still going to be metas and, like, matchups where Galactus is, like, really, really good. So I think I would say Galactus is like he's around, and also, you know, he's a big bad. He's always going to be worth 6,000 tokens. That's not nothing. Into the mid section, Stature is usually worse than the other options in her own deck. Black Bolt Stature has been phased out because when you play Black Bolt Stature in the Darkhawk deck, what you do is turn yourself into a deck that is just trying to put points on the board, and Bounce just does that better than you. Stegron is a fine card, but not particularly impactful. Pretty much the definition of mid. You're going to see him be played, though. It's not like the worst thing in the world. Master Mold, I'm down on the Ronin archetype right now. Probably more down, like, for the same reasons that I'm down on Stature, which is, if you're just trying to do points, and your turn 5 play is just points, you're just doing bounce, but bad. Spider-Man 2099 is pretty reasonable. But I think he only kind of goes in one thing, and he doesn't really make that thing the best it can be, I would say. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the best possible move deck used Spider-Man 2099, but I also think that he's very clearly a tier below Ghost Spider. I'd be very surprised if the best move deck used this and not this, which is why they are the way they are. In Kang, in the middle of Do Not Buy, I think we just have a card that is, like, he is what he is. I don't know. I can't think of many times that I would use him, but he is very unique, and he is a big bad. Howard the Duck is not a good card. I do not encourage you to buy it. I think the best thing it does is be a 1-2 ongoing. Negasonic Teenage Warhead, I still don't understand what they were going for with that buff. It doesn't make any sense to me. Snowguard is actually going to go below Living Tribunal. So let's talk about Living Tribunal first. I think, you know, the Living Tribunal Mr. Negative decks are the kind of thing that can really beat your ass if you're a weak snapper. Like, if you're not willing to press the advantage on those decks when you should be, you can actually get high rolled out of the game by that, but you probably shouldn't be. And Snowguard is never a card you should purchase in any sense of the word. You just shouldn't do it. You should never do it. Don't do that. Don't buy Snowguard. Don't do it. All right. That's going to be the tier list. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I've been Cam Best. Like, subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one.